Hello and welcome to My First Dungeon, the tabletop role-playing podcast where we help players learn new games and make each one better than the last. Each season, we choose a new game and a different GM to run it. Then we circle back around to discuss what went right, what went wrong, and how we can make our next game even better. This season, I'm going to be running a game that asks its players to consider the very nature of role-playing games and why it is that we play them. The game is called Die, and it was created alongside the British Fantasy Award-winning and Hugo-nominated comic of the same name. In the comic, a group of 6 teenagers sit around a table to play an RPG and wind up pulled into a fantasy world of their own creation. This game invites you to do the same. As always on this show, we want to set game masters and players up for success by bringing on the very best teachers and resources possible. And what better teacher could there be than the writer and creator of this very game? He is a comic book writer you may know from Phonogram, The Wicked and the Divine, and a number of Marvel projects including Immortal X-Men, and of course, he is the creator of Die. Please welcome Kieron Gillen. Kieron, welcome to the show.
Very nice to be here.
Very nice to have you. I've been looking forward to this for a while. I'm super excited to talk to you about this incredibly cool comic and this incredibly cool game.
Thank you. You just made me bashful because the intro was very effusive. So I'm aggressively British, so I'm going to be shy now.
Oh, I should have toned it down for the British guests. I should have done that. But if that wasn't enough, we also have another guest joining us today. He is a returning voice to this show and is the creative director of Rowan, Rook, and Deckard, who are publishing Die. He's the creator of Heart, Spire, and dozens of one-page RPGs, including the ever-popular Honey Heist. Please welcome back Grant Howitt.
Hello. Hi. I need to get Hugo nominated, I think. I don't know how you do it, but I've really got to just to try and keep up during the intros.
Multiple Hugo nominations, let's be honest.
Oh, multiple Hugo. Oh, man. Or I need to educate more people as to what the Ennies are, because no one really knows what they are.
You've won a lot of them now, too.
Heart won more than any other book that has ever won, but no one really cares. And like, I'll be trying to sell the book at cons and be like, do you know what an Ennie is? No. Oh, all right.
Okay, cool, thanks. It's just my life. Kieron, I'm going to ask you a very broad question. What is the elevator pitch for Die? What is this game, and who is it made for? Who is playing this game?
All good questions. Basically, when I was starting the comic book Die with Stephanie Hands, at least part of it was like we wanted to do stuff only we would really do. And I have weird history of games, which I'm sure we'll probably touch on later. And I thought, I know, I'll do a full game from scratch. Like the first arc of the comic's called Fantasy Heartbreaker, which is the term for like a homemade, ill-thought-out RPG. And I thought, I'll do my own ill-thought-out RPG, but I'll try to do it well. But I'll still call the first arc Fantasy Heartbreaker to cover my ass. So the idea was basically, I wanted to really I was chatting to a friend of mine, Amal, who she wrote co-wrote the book How to Lose the Time War. We find really interesting about games is that, especially from the narrative side, is that basically mechanics and structures and rituals are ways of teaching people how to make story. As in, if you can boil the story down to a set of rituals, you can allow people to create stories of their own. And that's what we want to do with Die, because it's kind of show, okay, this is how we do it. And in case in Die, you've got a group of, you gave me the intro. The short version is a group of messed up human beings from the real world get dragged up into a fantasy world that kind of echoes their real life trauma and losses and hopes and fears. And then they decide to go home or not. And basically, that's our game. We give, how do you make a real group of like people? We ask questions, you find it in the group together. And you take them to the fantasy world. We give structures to for the GM to work out, okay, how do you make this world really matter to this people? It's not enough to have a dragon. This dragon has to echo their distant, mother, or whatever, And then you've also got, at the end, the climax. And the fact that Die is a very kind of ritualized climax where you all decide to go home or not. And also, you've got to be unanimous. There's a built-in, full on your place where you're heading. So that's kind of it. And the sort of the implicit thing is like, no matter what characters you make up, as in we call the persona, they're going to say something about you. And you end up sort of thinking, so why do I play games? Is fantasy better than reality? They're kind of the themes. But reality is about how messed up people in a fantasy world that echoes themselves, trying to basically heal or not. And that's kind of what it's about. And also people get stabbed at various points with magical swords, as is the want.
Well, of course. I mean, you got it. There's some tropes you just have to hit.
Yeah.
It's still D&D, yeah.
Whenever I pitch Die, it's it sounds very arty, but at the same time, you're killing orcs. You have both in that way, because that's kind of what games are. And the level of orc killing versus crying in a circle will depend on who's playing the game, which is the point of the game. Does that answer the question?
That absolutely that answers that. I've got to rewrite my intro because you're way better at selling this game.
He's had a bit of practice.
A little bit more practice than me, once or twice. I remember reading this comic. I was introduced to the comic by a friend, Elliot Davis, who's been on the show before. He's like, oh, you got to read this. It's so cool. And I didn't immediately know it was a game as well. It was being developed as a game as well. So I read the comic and it hit all the best parts of me of like wanting to get pulled into a fantasy game, that type of thing. But the aspect of having to vote to go home is such a great driving force for a tabletop role-playing game, because it immediately grabs players, and there's that immediate kind of like intra-party conflict-ish. Who wants to say, why do you want to stay? Why do you want to go home? It immediately does something that I think really good games do, of providing a lot of immediate help for the players. Like immediately they know, this is who I am. I'm making a choice, because the game has kind of provided me the opportunity to answer that question.
Yeah. I'll say that the thing about die, especially describe it, it sounds so meta. People go, oh, isn't that going to be a bit cold and acerbic or whatever? And it's like, no, I mean, the structure of the game is like, you make the messed up people, you know what they're like, because you know messed up people. Mm-hmm. And the fact that you all know where you're heading, you all know the choices you're making and what, okay, do I want to go home or not? So all the way through, you've got so many great things to support you as players that you're not lost. You're really actually much more guided than many other games. So that's definitely like kind of what we're aiming for, I think.
I will also like to say that die comes with, I think, unique to a role-playing game as heavy as die can get. It has an irony safety net in that you're not really these people. In the let's say we were playing a standard role-playing game and my character has feelings. I have to, like, oh, how would my character feel and what am I doing? But in die, you're playing generally an angsty teenager who's pretending to be a warrior, who's pretending to be a wizard of some kind. And so by having that remove, you can explore these things. And at any point, if it gets a little bit uncomfortable, you can go, well, it isn't real, is it? But it is real, and you're still reacting. But it gives you a tremendous, again, like as Kieron was saying, we're both British. And there is a certain measure of not wishing to wear our hearts on our sleeves. And I think that die is excellently positioned to let us just very carefully roll up our sleeve and just show the tip of our heart to people.
It's like when I was playing Tales from the Loop, that was one of the first things that struck me is immediately by playing teenagers, you're allowed to be a little bit more raw. It's why Monster Heart works so well as well. So in die is like the basic game of die is you describe yourself as teenagers, and then you kind of get together like 10 or 20 years later. So it's basically that kind of, oh yeah, you were kids once and now you're a little bit older. So you're also basically, you're in your embarrassing teenage fantasy world aspect to it. And that always gives an element there. And just, it gives elements of irony, but it also gives elements of fun. Like if the world doesn't make much sense, it's fine. You've been forgiven, GM, because it's basically a bunch of like, this is a load of tropes were put together by teenagers who didn't know any better. Right. And let their id go crazy, Yeah. So there's lots of those kind of push and pull, as it's very serious, but it's also very goofy, and that's kind of that's very British as well. And I think that's like also that sort of makes it very home of Roman Rook and Deckard. I think there's an element of like,
oh for sure,
yeah. We've always, I think, like the phrase which I use internally but not externally is feet on the ground, head in the clouds.
Oh,
which is the idea that it should be daft and fantastical and mundane. And so, like the idea, the idea for Heart is not high fantasy or low fantasy, but what if high fantasy was shit? and just like there's something quite fun about okay, everyone's trying their best and it isn't really working, and like that's the core message of die as well, is that like none of the protagonists, or I'd even say the antagonists in the comic book, really have a full understanding of what's going on, and are just sort of rattling around inside infrastructure they didn't build. And speaking as someone who's part of late stage capitalism, it's something which I feel quite strongly.
I am really looking forward to that layer of that kind of additional layer of removal is interesting, because I'm super looking forward to the point that you talk about in Rituals, which is kind of the way this game was initially intended to be played, like a 2 to 4 session game where you build your personas together. So you're building the characters you're going to be playing. You step away from the table and you come back in. And now it's kind of like a mini Nordic LARP that you have where you're fully in character as those characters, building your paragons, which are, this game's term for classes, going into the world. I'm so excited for the moment where we step away and we come back and the game has fully begun. And I think that setting this up like that is setting up the players and the game masters for success in a way that I've not seen a lot of other games do. because you're coming in right away, you know what you're doing, and it gives you just so much freedom to come into that space and start making up in that crazy way. I think it's going to get really great buy-in from all the players immediately, which is like half the battle for a game master.
Thank you. Also, that's the thing. There's so much of the rituals is giving sizzle. Like the idea, especially rituals where these are good cliffhangers. We end the first episode here. It's a good beat. You know what I mean? Like, so people will come back next week wanting more. We end at the conclusion. That's also a good beat. And the whole game is kind of like, I played a lot of games, but it's my love letter to a lot. The fact we literally have a mini Nordic LARP halfway through the first session, that's kind of like, okay, can we get a taste of Nordic LARP in here? Like, you start with kind of like a very story game. It's all about answering questions, very for the Queen. You build a story together. Then when you go in the world, it's very much like there's a bit more Arnis and Gygax in there. It's a bit more that. And the whole game, but the story game side never stops. So it's all about the dialogue between the suggestions. You know what I mean? Like, so it's about all the shit I love in that way. And that's, I hope that comes across. It's like you sample stuff and, okay, drop this beat. This will work for you, I guess.
In terms of the rituals, which we put in there, like one of the things we were really keen to do at Rowan Rick and Deckard is take Kieron's work and make it more ritualized and try and have the idea of, because he already had the idea of handing around the dice and like these objects of power. But part of the experience of playing role-playing games as a young person is the GM not quite understanding what's going on. And so they're like, oh, there's a system, I don't quite get it, but we'll do it. And the thing is, if you follow the rules, the game works. And if you follow the rituals, die works, and you get this emotional thing. But again, it's got that ironic safety catch. It's got the safety belt where you can go, oh, this is a bit weird. Anyway, I'll read it aloud, and then the hairs on everyone's neck start tingling because there's something magic spell-like about it in that you read through it and it does the thing.
Yeah.
And we want you to feel safe and excited.
It's like when you hand out the dice, as Grant was saying, it's like you hand out the dice to everyone, and then at the end, you're like, everyone take the dice, close your eyes, and lower them to the table. Now count to 3 and we'll open your eyes. You're somewhere else. You know what I mean? And that always worked. Not just despite the silliness, because of the silliness. You know what I mean? We've all made this little leap together. We've done this little ritual. We've played this little game. And so much of die came from the idea of like, die's a magical object. All the dice in D&D, they look weird. That's why parents were scared of them. The kids suddenly had these, are they artifacts from an evil god? You know what I mean? And like die just goes, yes, let's say they were. Let's lean into the weird magic circle nature of RPGs and what we can do to make it feel creepy is the wrong word, but feel enchanted. As it lean into that stuff, and that's something I love about like rituals. It's a really good word. Like, was it? I forget it was Grant or Zach who put the word ritual on it, but like that was so much about like lean into the spooky cultiness of it.
I do think rituals in games was not a thing I'd really thought about until I just recently played my first game of 10 Candles.
Ah, yes.
And that game, I mean,
it's 110% ritual.
It's entirely ritual, but
yeah,
I didn't realize how well it would work until we started passing around the tape recorder. And then the first time we said, and we are alive in that game, the tone around the table completely, like everyone was so in. And like one of the players immediately kind of like, curled up a little bit like, I didn't like that. That was terrifying. That was scary. That was proper scary. It makes things very familiar and very easy to get onto. It's a great on-ramp for a game.
I've got a hack of 10 candles I want to do. Make it around sweets.
Please.
It's like a Halloween game, 10 candies, and just everyone has to eat the sweets as the game goes to the end. There's a few more things than that.
I've got a 2 Ronnie's hack called 4 candles. It's much shorter.
I want to talk more about the rituals aspect of this game, but before we kind of dive into playing sessions of the game, I want to talk a little bit about the specific mechanics of the game. So die is built around a D6 system, but there are also the main 6 polyhedral die involved. Can you talk a little bit about the core game mechanic and then how those polyhedral dice, the D20, D12, D10, D8, D6, D4, kind of come into the paragons?
Okay. Like when I was starting die, I realized there's a few things. I wanted to feel like the sort of game that a precocious teenager in 1991 might have made, assuming they knew more than they could know. So like in some ways, like in 1991, if you were the sort of person who were listening to this podcast, you probably wouldn't have, probably been weirdly snooty about the weirdest stuff. So like I would have not played D&D in 1991. Specifically 16-year-old snooty Kieron wouldn't have. But I would have been into dice pools because Vampire just started and, and Cyberpunk was happening and all those kind of stuff. I know Cyberpunk wasn't dice pool, but you know what I mean? Like the dice pool was the new hotness. So clearly Soul's going to use dice pool. But there's the other aspect of dice pools, the fact that I wanted all the characters to have ownership of one of the dice. And that's that kind of, so everyone gets to touch one dice. And of course that means that you could do a game where only you just roll one. And just there's someone's done that recently. It's really interesting. But that was a bit too formalist for no sake. I thought, okay, one of these dice has to be the basic dice. The D6. The D6 is, in cultural speaking, the basic dice. So it's got through enough D6s. People know what D6s are. And the other side of it is, I also knew that I wanted a really robust, simple core mechanic because all the classes mechanics are going to be weird. Mm-hmm. Everyone gets the basics. And then everyone is also doing their individual kind of very asymmetrical metagame. So the system I went for is, it was a little bit influenced by the, actually Warhammer 3rd edition of all things, but it became Cortex later. Because I really liked how there's like 2 economies in that. So the way it works is this: you take your stat, number of D6, you add any advantages, add a dice, any disadvantages, take away a dice. You've got a difficulty, we'll worry about that later. You throw the dice, 4 pluses are successes. If you've got any successes after difficulty is removed, you do it. If not, you fail. That's the core mechanic. There's also a second one, like if you roll 6 on the dice, you get to activate special effects. So in other words, your character may have a variety of special effects you can activate, and you have to choose what to spend your 6s on. That's the sort of the spice. And that's it. That's really the kind of the basics. And there's lots of ways you can interpret it. Like that's the kind of what I wanted to. I wanted to do something that would work for me as a GM. So it was, this is the basics, but like, I'm going to set like a total of successes and the whole point, you're going to try to get them. Or I'll try to create something complicated like a Powered by the Apocalypse move. It supports all that kind of stuff. But the core is roll dice, 4 plus success, hit total, get it. And then you've got the extra polyhedrals. And all the classes get to add their own dice in different situations. And that speaks to what the classes are. Because the one thing we haven't really talked about yet is that the Paragons are all kind of deconstructions of the classic D&D sorts. Like we don't have warriors, we have emotion knights, we don't have rogues, we have Neo. And all these are kind of like a discussion of like, what does that class really be like? Like Neo, that's a good example. Neo is a sort of a cyberpunk class, weirdly dropped into a fantasy game. That's me riffing on a Shadowrun, of course, also 91, 92. So that kind of like what these kids would have been into. And it's about a few other things, like the D10 is the newest dice in existence. That's the one that didn't exist in ancient times. So that's, there's always also what actually Cyberpunk 2020 ran off, all that kind of that meta stuff. But in reality, it's like, what are rogues? Rogues steal stuff. And people traditionally in games were worried about rogues because, they're thieves. And it's like, well, all characters are thieves. All they do is steal stuff. Why? And I thought, no, let's mechanize it. So the case of the Neo, they have to collect something called Fair Gold. They have their special abilities or gifts, which are basically cybernetic, power-ups. And they have to activate their gifts every day, otherwise they don't do anything. So in other words, you've got a class here who is desperate for a resource. And if they don't get the resource, they can't do anything. In other words, everyone in the party is worried about what this person will do for this one resource. And that's the kind of tension, that's their spice. And if they actually are using their gift, they get to add their D10 to the dice pool. So in other words, let's say the Neo's using their gun. They've powered up their gun with Fair Gold. Now they can shoot. So they roll the dexterity pools. So say they've got dex of 3, roll 3 dice. If they've got the gun turned on, they also include the D10. And of course, the most basic thing about the gun being turned on is a D10 is better than a D6. If it's 4 plus for a success, D10 is much better at getting successes. It's also much better at getting specials. You know what I mean? So like in a very real and mechanical way, the players are better than anyone else you meet in the game because only the players get dice. These are literally part of the icon is there's only one D10 in the game. That means everyone else you meet won't have that D10. That you basically start the game with the equivalent of the Rings of Power. So anytime you get to like put your special dice in the game, it's kind of magical because only you get to play with the D10. Only you get to play with the D12 if you're a Godbinder. All the classes have other things to do with their dice as well. I originally started by trying to make a completely different way of interacting with the dice for all the players, and none of them overlapped in any way. Mm-hmm. And the more I got into it, the more I realized, no, actually just adding it to the dice pool is just fun. People like that. And there's a few other things, there's other stuff in the mix.
People always really like adding more dice to the dice pool.
Like when the master gets to add a D20, knowing they get a success and a 4 plus, that's kind of like, it's like how dare you? That's literally unfair, Absolutely. Which is the point of that class. But that's the core mechanic. Roll dice 4 plus.
It's great.
I spoke for 10 minutes to say roll dice plus 4 plus. That's my way I roll.
Honestly, it's a great, very simple mechanic. It's very easy to explain, very easy to understand. One of the questions I have is, I am very aware of like Dungeons and Dragons difficulty classes. So I know DC 5, you're going to get it. DC 20 is hard. DC 15 is like kind of a standard. In Die, what are the kind of the levels of, difficulty classes you would set for various actions?
I've been GM'd by Kieron, and I want you to know that isn't the sort of thing which he cares about. He would much rather tell a story and not punish you for trying to do something difficult. So the odds of him using difficulty are pretty rare. They are there. And I will say, it's precisely the same thing that I write in my games. In that if we ever break out difficulty in Spire or Heart, everyone's like, oh, fine, all right, I suppose. It's already quite hard to roll the things. Sorry, that was me attempting to undermine you before you answer the question very eloquently.
Successful.
You're not entirely wrong, though. The system is very much designed. So, what do you want to use difficulty for? What is difficult in your game? Like, because statistically speaking, a normal stat is 2. So, 2 dice, you've got a 50% chance of getting 1 success. So, you're basically going to probably get 1 success. So, most of the things, that's not quite right. My brain has fell apart. It's late in the day here. No, you got about slightly better. You've got over half. You got 75% chance of success. But like almost anything normal, you don't roll. Is that right? So you got 50. Like anything normal, you don't.
I think it's 50.
Is it 50? Why is my brain done that?
Well, because only one of them has to do it, and you're rolling it twice.
Yeah, but if you roll one, it's 50% chance. Oh, it's half. Yeah, you're right. Can we delete this whole bit from the?
Wait, no, it isn't 50. It is more.
I don't think it's 50, but I don't think it's 75.
Jesus Christ!
I think it's 75.
It might be 75.
Games designer, yeah. Okay. No. I actually leave this bit in because, in fact, I want you to cut back in now with a bit that I say my book's won more role-playing game awards than any other book. Heart won more than any other book.
In the original Die Management, there's an entire page about going through the odds. If you give difficulty X, what's the chance of success and all that kind of crap. And we cut it because it's not very important. In reality, it's like most stuff in Die you can do explicitly. If you were like, say, because it's the other side of it, Stat 2 is normal. Stat 3 is as good as anyone on Earth. Stat 4 is superhumanly good. Like even if you're not trained, you can basically do Olympic athlete stuff. You know, generally, and Die characters probably start with like 2 stats of 3 or 1 stat of 4. You are really good at what you do. So in other words, like picking locks ain't a problem for you. If orcs are about to attack you, yeah, probably it's a problem, and then you might roll. For me, difficulty is all contextual. So like picking a lock, if the Neo has time, yeah, you can do it. If they've got someone coming, then you might roll. And even then, I'd probably just not set any difficulty. In other words, 1 success is good. But if things are tricky, I much more prefer to, there's a lot of fail forward in it. In that kind of like, I'll set a difficulty of 1, let's say. So if set a difficulty of 1, that means you've got to get 2 successes. And if you don't get 2 successes, I'll do a complication. It's the classic, oh, you're picking the lock, your lockpick breaks. Or, oh, there's guards behind the door. You know, anything like that. So all those kind of things to keep the story rolling, that's what I'm interested in. That's where I think where the system excels. It's like it does some very heart-like stuff in terms of, okay, let's zoom all the way out and do this battle as a kind of a big event. So everyone roll their dice pools. How many successes do you get? And then we're gonna, if you get as many successes needed, you've won that battle. You know, or you can zoom right in and go microscale. And that's why it's the success economy is what I think about. So the more I run Die, the more actually I don't tend to use difficulty. I use success counts.
Interesting.
But that's kind of like harder to explain and also like more clumpy. Clumpy is a technical designer term, I think you'll find.
Yeah, it's in the glossary, I saw it.
Yeah. But if you're running the most basic club, it's like, for me, any great core mechanic or any good core mechanic, you can fall back to the basics. And it's that kind of like, okay, just roll dice 4+. If it's a bit quite tricky, make it difficulty 1, remove success. If a human couldn't do it, 2 successes. Because that's gonna, if you think about how the math works, if you remove 2 successes from if your stat's got 2, that means you can't succeed.
Right.
So that's the easy way of putting it. It's like 0, pretty, whatever. 1, really quite tricky. 2, human couldn't do it. That's probably the basic way I would break it down.
I would like to briefly touch on the one of the challenges of writing a core mechanic for a game such as Die, which is anything can happen in a game of Die. And I don't mean that in a sort of round up, anything can happen in a game. I mean, like, you can't predict what's going to happen because we know what classes there's going to be, but we don't know what the world is going to be. And it's expressly generated by the players and the GM at the start of the game as you make your characters, and that all bubbles up. And so when it came to, say, for example, writing down the difficulty examples, I think writing difficulty examples in games is my least favorite part of my job. It's absolutely wretched. And in Die, it's much harder because everything is very, well, I mean, the world isn't covered by physics. It's governed by emotion and narrative. And so everything is wibbly wobbly and very strange. And so having a core mechanic which is that basic, which is that like you can't partially succeed. on it. You fail or you succeed, and there's wiggle room where you can have it happen in the middle, but ultimately it's an interpretation between you and the GM with some ritual objects in the middle of it. And that is because the core action of it is so vague. I wouldn't have wanted to try and do something like Apocalypse World and define the 7 most common actions in Die. I wouldn't want to do this to try and cover absolutely everything, but instead have something which is very bare bones, which then the GM and the players negotiate their way around.
I mean, it's one of the key things. It's like, what do you get an advantage for in Die? We don't tell you. You know, and there's one of these bits where you say, like, even like spells like the Godbinder has, it's like advantage against the creatures of evil. What's the creature of evil? Decide at your table. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, we explicitly leave stuff to be defined because that's more interesting than shutting down stuff. I think actually it's worth stating the other reason why I made the mechanic so simple was the fact that it's not all player facing. Like monsters roll, and for me that's important in Die, that everyone you meet in the world is the same statistic reality as you do. Because we're talking about a fantasy versus reality game. If you make the players more real or less real than the people they meet, you've already answered the question. You know,
Right.
So philosophically, I had to do it that way around. But as a player, I knew that it needs to move quickly. So if the GM is rolling for monsters as well, it has to be cut to the bone too. So that's the other flip of it.
It is an interesting thing that you said, that the world itself of Die is not driven by physics. Like, that's not the main guiding principle. It's driven by narrative. Like,
sorry, that's me guessing. I'm sure there's some sort of scientific explanation in the back of Kieran's head.
I mean, but it's true. Like, within the comic, like, when you build this world, it's entirely built around your players' characters' fears and emotions and regrets and life experience. Like, that is the, physics, that is the reality of the world. So you can use that as justification for any kind of difficulty swings that you want, because that's the driving force, like what these players are feeling, rather than, what is true as written by Newton.
Yeah.
I think it's much more interesting to have this is difficulty 2 because it's your dad, rather than this is difficulty 2 because the wall is very tall.
Yeah.
That's true. I mean, it's like it's one of we have the kind of the core sort of GM principles of Die, and one of them is like, if it gets too fantastical and genre, you bring it back to normality and vice versa. So they're kind of like, if someone just starts throwing fireballs, you want to stop. You've thrown a fireball. How do you feel about that? Last week you were a depressed teacher in a class teaching students you don't like. Now you're throwing a fireball. Tell me about it. You know what I mean? So that's so much. How does it feel like to stab your dad through the chest with a chainsaw? These kind of when it starts getting too genre, you drag it back, and also vice versa. Like when it starts getting too grounded, you make it weird. Oh, that's true. I think that's really interesting. I mean, there's one really small mechanic in the core game, which I decided to include because there was early on in the playtest, there was a tendency, or at least for some players, once you got past Persona Gen and you went into Die, they started treating themselves like the adventurers, which is one reason why you start doing all the stuff I've just described. But there's also a very simple flashback mechanic. Like if you flashback to something in the real world that gives you kind of emotional reasons to be better at this task, you get an advantage. And you do that for like once a session. And that, of course, is encouraging people to bring back their real life into the game, and get a small advantage for it. And for certain, of course, a lot of the players will just do it anyway. But some players, they'll go, oh, wait, I can get an extra dice for like thinking about, I miss my dad or whatever, and that's like a small mechanical way to encourage even the most mechanically minded players to role play.
You rube, we just made you feel.
How dare we?
And then just as far as the mechanics go, advantage and disadvantage in this game is just adding or subtracting one or more D6s to your dice.
Yes. I did think about changing that just for obvious D&D reasons, but no, it's just the right word. And also, it was originally a much more complicated system, but Grant eventually talked me into removing the bad dice mechanic. And
there was a capital B, capital D, bad dice. And it only showed up in like one paragraph, but it was underpinning the core of the system. And we had to sort of like, hey, so Kieran, I've changed it so there's no bad dice. I'm very sorry. To Kieran's tremendous credit, he was like, oh, but I wrote a joke about the bad dice later. Yeah, it's okay. We can take out the joke as well.
It's good. You had to it was a mechanical kludge because we don't need to go into the maths because anyone listening can tell we're bad at math. But but it was specifically because adding one dice is increasing difficulty by one is the equivalent of adding removing two dice. So mathematically it's all kind of broke. So you add the bad dice and it rolls 4+, you subtract 1. So mathematically it makes sense, but at the same time it's really kludgy. And the only funny thing about it was you had to basically scapegoat one dice. And like, this is the bad dice now. No one shun the bad dice. And we had to Exactly, yeah. It's like put it on a pedestal and boo at it, which is a lot of fun, but also should be cut from an RPG, which is why you have professionals who win Emmys to look at your game.
Thanks, Kieron.
I do regret not having the experience of being able to shun some of the dice, but I'm sure players will do that regardless of whether or not it's built into the game.
Yeah.
Midnight Muscadines is a cozy, dark tabletop role-playing game where light and shadow intertwine in a fractured world. Players take on the roles of marmoteers, brave adventurers who journey into the untamed wilderness to collect the elusive Midnight Muscadines, craft magical jams, and protect the fragile light of Nim. Through collaborative storytelling and resourceful gameplay, players weave tales of courage, community, and the pursuit of balance. Will you preserve the light, uncover the truths hidden in the shadows, or reshape the balance of the world forever? Midnight Muscadines is perfect for fans of Studio Ghibli and Sea of Stars who seek to capture the magic of exploration and the heartfelt adventure in a world where small heroes make a big impact. Play Midnight Muscadines as a traditional GM'd game, GMless, or even solo. Midnight Muscadines is crowdfunding now on BackerKit. Join the campaign at pandeongames.com/muscadines.
I'm Quinns of tabletop role-playing game review show Quinn's Quest, and this is Play to Find Out. Play to Find Out is an actual play podcast that brings notorious old games from the 80s and 90s back to the table. Each season of Play to Find Out, I'm joined by Emily Johnson and Rob Morgan.
Good? Nervous?
Yeah.
You both looked at each other really concerned, like you think what's about to happen is going to be unpleasant. And frankly, I think that's rude.
And together, we explore the TTRPGs of ages gone by. Our goal, to separate the TTRPGs that deserve to be remembered from those that maybe don't. I don't know, Emily. It was the 80s.
Also,
a lot of people were on cocaine. We blow the dust from decrepit systems to learn how they work. Your 100 on the encounter table bursts out. Right, you've encountered a bug. Get ready. Don't laugh.
There's one get ready for a fog.
Don't laugh. Encounter their unique quirks.
I do finger guns to cover up how I wince.
A weird thing happens as you do finger guns.
Oh no.
And I'm hoping that the Quinn's Quest community will join us in exploring these games too. If you this up, cannot describe to you how much your adventure ends here.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because the best way to learn is to play to find out. Play to Find Out is available now on the Quinn's Quest Patreon, but the first episode of each series streams for free on the Quinn's Quest YouTube channel and wherever you get your podcasts. Anyway, you failed the Earthtech roll, and you made jokes while I was doing my exposition, so you don't get to hear any more.
Oh, no. Come on.
I was shook as...
We touched on some of the paragons. I just kind of want to go through the other paragons that are available to the players. We touched on the Neo. Can you talk about the other paragons represented by the D4, D6, D8, D12, and D20?
Okay, I mentioned the Neo, who's basically your take on rogues. Let's go down to the D8, which is our emotion knight. The emotion knight, which they're never called emotion knights in the game. They're always called one of the 8 emotions, because there's a genuine proper psychology guy who I've taken his theory, ripped it out, and plugged it into an RPG system. I'm sure he'll approve. So you've got these 8 primary emotions, and each of these knights is kind of a paladin of them. And the idea, the more they feel that emotion, the more they get to do their powers. On low level, it's much more like standard sort of fightery abilities. High level is something called creative violence, where they can burn all the emotion up and defeat something enormous. And armies, gods. Like, it's generally the moment where you pull the sword and use it all, and you take it down however you choose. And that's one of the fun things about creative violence. Explicitly, you get to define how it happens. So what does creative violence look like? And that's one of the useful things about the paragons. Almost all of them have these kind of low level, more like procedural abilities, like D&D stuff. And then you've got the high level, big narrative abilities where shit's really going to happen, and you're going to change the story in meaningful way, or big ways rather. Emotional, and the idea, like, it's a bit paladin-y. If you play a rage knight, it's a bit berserkery. But at the same time, it's about the emotions, you know? So they're fun. And obviously the D8, because the D8 is the classic fighter dice in D&D. Let's go up to the Godbinder. Godbinder's D12. D12 is it's our cleric class. It's basically, because it's the weird thing about D&D is like, yes, I can do miracles, but only small miracles. Like, my God will help me cure this small wound, and then allow me to cure 5 other small wounds, and then I'm done. And it's like, what on earth relationship with a god is that? And it's this weird, sort of the idea of taking that as some kind of deal, you know, the whole kind of deal with God aspect. Maybe you bartered for it. That's where the Godbinder's gone from, as well as like a normal smaller scripture. They've also got the ability to pick up the D12 and talk to one of their gods and say, hey, I want this done. What do you want for it? And the god will pitch you and back and forth, and you'll make a deal. And some of the deals involve this currency we have called debt, which is a bit more open. But sometimes it's like, okay, sure. I want you to do is make sure, set fire to this castle, and I'll bring your friend back from the dead. Or, you know what I mean? So, and the fun thing about the Godbinder is, and one hand, it's really quite spelly mechanically. Another hand, it's a real great role-playing thing, because you pick up the dice and suddenly you've got a number of NPC in your head. Like, you start with 1, and like abstractly, you can get all 12. So you've suddenly got 12 gods existing, you know, anytime you pick up the dice. And there's nothing really fun, and so much great stuff just comes from that. D12, of course, 12, most pantheons.
It is an amazing, like, just the Godbinder class and like being able to talk to us is an amazing help for game masters. When you need a Deus Ex Machina, it's built into the game in such a fun way. We got 12, and like, it's built in that, like, yeah, this is going to come at a cost, and I'm going to tell you exactly what that cost is. Or maybe I'm going to call in that cost late. Like, it's just such a great way for game masters to call back, increase the stakes, decrease the stakes. I'm a big fan of that class.
It's really, honestly, it works really well, especially like the most powerful miracles are normally done for an IOU. In other words, not a promise, specifically something big down the line. And of course, that's a gun on the mantelpiece. When will the god call that favor in? Also, the GM has no idea at that point. Probably. I mean, or they may, but they know it's like, here's something big. They probably won't be able to say no to it. Like, and that's really, really great for like kicking the plot around. And most of the campaigns that I ever ran have involved killing one of the gods at one point. There's a lot of like, you know, when the gods go too far. Let's go down to the D6. D6 is the fool. You mentioned the D6 is kind of the class that runs the game. In other words, he's got D6, but everyone else is D6. So kind of the joke is, there's nothing special about this guy. They're just kind of the fool. The fool's kind of like half of the bard. It's kind of the swashbuckly, playful, not taking it too seriously.
I think the fool's a player archetype rather than a character archetype.
You literally stole my next sentence there.
I'm so sorry.
No.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
There's also you're entirely right, because I'm not going to go. This is another half. The classes all kind of map onto other sorts of players as well. And the fool is literally the classic noughties, Leroy Jenkins, not taking it too seriously, charging without thinking class. The fool basically gets to add their D6 anytime they're acting something ill-advisedly. And of course, it's one of the things you don't want to push that too far. It's basically entering a fight is worth having that dice. It's really carefully planning an ambush that may mean you don't take that dice. It's that kind of like, it's more about, and the other thing about the fool is it's not that you feel like carefree or anything, it's you act carefree. Mm-hmm. It's got a real kind of like, if people are kind of playing against type, you've got a real kind of Tears of the Clown aspect with the fool. And the fool's of a really big ability is they've got hyper luck, basically, because what they get to do is they can doodle on their D6. And if they roll the symbols they've doodled on, their flukes of luck happen around them, or flukes of bad luck if they kind of go wrong. I really like the vandalizing the dice aspect to it. You know what I mean? Because that speaks to the fundamental relevancy of the class. Oh, and they've also got the ability to hand over their dice to the GM to get them out of anything.
That is my favourite part of the fool. When we did Paranoia, my favourite psychic power we did was called Memory Holes. And you roll it, and then if you succeed, you ask the GM to help you, and then you wake up after that's happened. And so basically, it's a real sort of, hey, fuck me up. like I don't want this trouble. I want different trouble. And it's lovely that the fool can just do that at any point.
It's like giving it, and there's like the other way as well as like you're giving it back, and then the GM is going to fuck them. There's also the aspect that if the fool messes up a plan in some way, they can get their dice back early. And that the real push and pull there is they can choose what to do, as opposed to what the GM hits them with. They can perhaps get away with something a bit smaller. And there's like these, and the moment you say to the party, like, if I didn't do it then, you have no idea what that monster on the other side of the table would have done to us. I had to insult the princess. And that's at the fault. That's the other aspect of the game. I kind of wanted to have a variety of mechanical complexity. But that Falls kind of, as well as a playful class, it's also a class which is less rules dense, And it's still very powerful, but less rules dense. Then down to the D4. The D4 is the other half of the bard, which is basically the idea of like, if you think about bards, like they do emotion control. That's what bards do. They sing songs and they make people feel stuff. And that's petrifying. That's literally, if you viewed through any modern understanding of like emotions, that's really creepy. So basically the dictator is the idea of the bard as a horror class. They have a thing called the voice, which is the way of performing. They say things and they control people's emotions. If they're very, very powerful, like it's almost not almost impossible to resist, but very hard to resist. And uniquely for the class, they have trouble rolling low. Like instead of rolling, they roll the D4, and that's the number of successes they get as standard. And the other rest of the dice pool is how you modify it up and down. So if you roll 4 successes and roll 0 successes on the D6, you can't change it from 4. So 4's a really big emotional effect. You might just suddenly like, I'm going to try to frighten this person away, and suddenly you've just killed them. And or if you roll a critical failure, that person's stuck on that emotion forever. The dictator are petrifying to be around. And generally just creepy in every single way. And a lot of the other classes are about what you do to get power. You know what I mean? Like the negotiation. I want this, you give me that push and pull. The dictator's slightly different in terms of like, there's not many strings for you for the dictator. You just hurt everyone around you. Mm-hmm. And what will this power do to you? And it's a tempting thing. It's the idea art is creepy. It's kind of what the dictator is about. And finally, the D20, to the other end, which is the master. And the masters are basically... if you're playing the game standardly in Rituals, that's basically a GM only class. It's basically the classic 1980s idea, the GM as the hostile bad guy who cheats behind the screen or whatever. It's that. The master is basically sort of reality warper, a wizard as reality warper, hostile GM as character class. And they get to do stuff like put together rules to make their own spells, and they also get to basically cheat. There's no two ways around it. They get to bend the rules. And if you're like playing a player master, if you're really pushing the rules and risking death from the judges of all reality, you go, yeah, like that Robin Hood guy we've just turned up to help us, I reckon. He was probably passing, and they check, and suddenly it's here. If you're on the GM side, it's got a much more simple thing of they have a number of cheats they can do throughout the game. And that's partially like, obviously a balancing thing. It's also partially if you end up fighting the master at the end of the game, it just kind of stops them being killed quite as quickly. Because they can cheat to avoid dying a few times, which is a nice, and it gives the game a climax in a different way. Yeah, Master's fun. Sorry, especially if you've got the player side, literally the judges of all reality turn up when you're caught cheating, and you've got to basically beg for your life. And, then you get punished depending how well you beg. So that's a fun, and that's a class in the appendix. There's a lot in Die.
There's a lot. I mean, it's a 400-page book now?
Yeah, 416, something like that.
Big old book.
Just a side question. When you first, envisioned this comic and you're like, oh, of course I've got to create a role-playing game to go along with it. At what point did you realize, oh, this is going to be 400 additional pages of role-playing game?
Probably when Grant cut half of it. We thought it probably about 800 before that.
Yeah, when I managed to trim it down to 400 pages. No, that's the thing. Like, it's 400 pages. We're quite generous with layout. Ryan Hughes, a legendary comics designer, was heavily involved in Die from the get-go, and so there was this very clean design, which we tried to imitate, and thankfully we were able to get him in to sort of chat to us about making it work. And so we've got quite a lot of white space, quite a lot of art, because we're able to use Stephanie's art, but it is a whacking great book. It's massive. And yeah, before then, it would have been kind of like an Encyclopedia Britannica, all written first person in Kieron Gillen's voice. It was the equivalent of celebrity guest Kieron Gillen putting his arm around you in the pub and telling you how to run a game. Yeah. and we were like, well, let's make it a game.
Yeah, and never leaving you alone. It's literally been cornered in the pub by this very boring man telling you about his homebrew RPG. You do worry about the size because it's got a lot in there. But at the same time, as Grant says, there's a lot of art, there's a lot of space. But at the same time, the core game is very accessible. That's the really important thing. Isn't I was thinking that, I wanted this to be a really good game for people who know RPGs, but also knew that people are going to pick this up not knowing anything. It's a weird game to be your first RPG, but I want it to be accessible and friendly to anyone who wants to give it a shot. And that doesn't mean reading a 400-page book. That's like reading a couple of sections, maybe reading the handouts, have a go at Rituals, you're sorted, And
trusting the book as well, trusting the rituals, trusting the system to be like, okay, we'll get something fun out of this. And Die as written is formulaic. And that's one of the strengths of it. In the because it's formulaic, we can afford to get a character arc in a one shot, and because it's formulaic, people can poke fun at that formulaic whilst also taking part in it. And that level of structure, that's the thing. That's the thing that we've written stuff out. We've written it long form, as opposed to just sort of being brisk and saying, "Okay, make it up yourself." On you go. No. We've and you can make it up yourself. You can just go back to that D6 pool if you want, but these structures are there to enable you to come up with something as evocative as the comic, but you made it yourself.
There's a lot of showing you're working. You know what I mean? For me, it's like, this is how I wrote Die. This is how I made up messed up people. This is how I made up a world.
Yeah.
Formula is tricky. It always sounds like an insulting word there, but it's it's not. It's saying this is how you do it. There's a bit like halfway through we say idea plus idea equals novelty.
I loved reading that.
That's what correct. Do you know what my job is? Is that okay? That's boring. If I suddenly add this, that's less boring. And that's it. That's what we do. I mean, early on, like always in the add-on scenarios, you had a set list of questions, but the core Die game didn't, because it's had freeform. One of the first things Mina said was like, for God's sake, write a load of questions for this. Give a set of questions, and I did, and obviously it makes the game much better. Especially now you can add in different social groups and plug them in. You know what I mean? There's so much of like, relax, follow this. We really have. We've playtested it a lot. You know what I mean? It's one of the things that I've really, it is a game that I've put through the ringers and seen how it's worked and seen how it's failed and like bits where tripped up players, and we've sort of ended up something I'm really proud of. Like in between, the game and how it's been expressed and how it's been edited and pulled together. Like I think it genuinely looks after people. And that's actually the kind of really intense year of indie RPGs I played before I started writing Die. The thing I took from that was like how little care there is for GM in this industry. I was distraught over games that even games my players thought went well. I was distraught for weeks later. And I was aware that we've got to be kinder to GMs. We've got to allow them to be more relaxed, not to worry about it as much, and all those kind of things. And that's kind of part of the attitude I wanted to percolate through the game, really. You got this, kid. So patronizingly. And
that's like the tagline of this show is, if you're having fun, you're doing it right. I want to make sure that people are set up for success, that they have the best chance of having a good time whenever they play a game. And I think this game especially really does, as you say, go out of its way to make a GM feel very comfortable and very at ease, especially when following the rituals, which is the way that we're going to be playing on this show. I kind of want to talk about rituals as an overall thing, because this is the way the game was initially designed to be played. There is a lot of stuff in the back of the book about how to play Die as a long-term campaign, but the rituals is the way that we're going to be playing it. Can you talk a little bit about how that was broken down and what that kind of looks like for a game master?
That's a really big question.
It is a big question.
When I started designing Die, one of the things I really did early on is I knew the persona genders really changed very little. The ritual coming to Die has changed very little. The first encounter has changed very little, and the climax has changed very little. But the middle world generation bit, early on, it was made up every single time. I did persona gen, then I stepped away from the table and I went, where the hell am I going to put these people? And it literally every single game, I had to work out where they were going to be and how I was going to do it. And I was like, and of course, that's a hard thing to teach anybody.
There's an element of draw the rest of the fucking L.
Yeah, exactly. But then what actually turned out to be a very boring game. The personas came up and the answers were quite boring. It's like this group because all the other groups had something interesting, so I could grab that and run with it.
Right.
They all people all in a band. I said it at the Reading Festival. All that kind of stuff. And this one, nothing big. And I was like, what can I do? And I just stepped away and I thought, the old RPG world. I'll send them to that old teenage RPG world, because that allowed me to ask questions and we can build off. That really that's simple. Oh, that's great. That's robust. That'll work. Then I realised that's robust for everybody. As long as, any group that went to an RPG world together can go to that RPG world and have a shared social thing that means something to all the persona.
Right.
And that was one of those kind of that's the first one. That's the first game everyone should play. And that's where rituals came from. I said, okay, this will work. And I guarantee you, by narrowing the boundaries of complete freedom, it's going to work. In the same way, the climax always ensures no matter what happens in the middle, they can just wander around and drink in the bar. At the end of the session, Master will turn up and have a climax. You know what I mean?
Right.
That's the basic of story structure. We've got a strong beginning, we've got a strong end. And as long as you've got a strong end, the players will forgive anything. You know, so like, you know, there's all that kind of that. Sorry, does that mostly answer the question?
No, it definitely does.
The players make up the middle bit.
Yeah.
Which is why they care about it.
Yeah.
One of the heartbreaking things about being a games designer, and especially writing fiction in games, world building, that sort of thing, which Die is very light on. There's very little any sort of canonical information in there. But anything I come up with will be, if it's used, regurgitated by a bored, tired person who is trying to convince 4 other bored, tired people who just want to go kill the orc that, oh, this is a really interesting story. And it's going to be a fraction as interesting as one person has an idea and someone else goes, oh yeah, and then that's it. That's much better than anything I can come up with. So giving people the tools to do that means that they'll have a fun time.
I mean, the thing about the bit between the 2 sessions, that's the reason why you can do it in a one shot. It's just slightly more work. Mm-hmm. But the bit, you do the first session, you end at this cliffhanger that they've arrived in their teenage fantasy world. That's where you end the session. Then between first session and second session, you can do a bit of prep. Not a lot of prep. You just really just sit down and go, okay, I'm going to write down everything they said in Persona Gen. Okay, this person's upset with their dog. This person is having arguments with their boss. The big, this person having, the real big troubles, but also the minor bullshit.
Right.
Or this person really likes season 2 of Lost. This person wants to, really misses some old sweet brand they can't get anymore. You know what I mean? That's the stuff which is just, the stuff they threw off as a joke and they think you forgot about it. So they'll remember the fact that, they've got a traumatic relationship with their dad. They won't remember like the season 2 of Lost. So when you turn up and suddenly you're on you arrive and you're on an island and there's something in the woods, and it's basically, the ghost of your dad or whatever, or polar bear. You know what I mean? I've just made that up off the top of my head, but you know what I mean? Like by mining the persona's details, and suddenly there's a bit we cut from the manual. Describe it as the Marshmallow Man rule.
Yeah.
Okay.
You ever watched the first Ghostbusters? And it was, it will take the form of like whatever we think of, and they think about the Marshmallow Man. That's Die. Whatever the characters have thought about is going to be their Marshmallow Man. So like whatever the personas have come up with, and you can do that all the way through. It's like kind of if you've got a question you haven't got, it's like if you want to know something about them, you just ask. It's like, okay, tell me about your grandma's house. And or your character, your persona's grandma's house, and then suddenly, oh, it's a house that looks just like that in the woods ahead of you. There's a large wolf outside it. You know what I mean? Like, and that you've just set up there, but immediately you ask more questions if you want to know more stuff, and the players care about it because they've just made it up, and it's a really easy thing for GMing in terms of like, okay, describe your house. Like, how many rooms is it downstairs? Oh, there's 3 rooms. Great. There's 3 rooms. You're making them make up the dungeon map, but also being GM, you get to twist it any way you want. It's like, oh yeah, there's a stairs up. Oh, there's no stairs upstairs in this house. So, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean?
It is a great, very easy tool for like terror and suspense to like build very quickly and very easily in a way that players actually buy into and care about.
Because, I mean, I don't mean it's in a bad way. Players are really self-centered.
The game is self-centered.
In a good way. Yes,
like,
exactly.
It only exists because of them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the fundamental narcissism of what we're doing, we're just making this up. And it's like, oh, this is us. And you see yourself reflected. And the great joy, what I like about die GMing is, as opposed to just putting it all in the player's hands, which is so many really great games do, it kind of, you give it to GM, and GM twists it a little and then gives it back. Mm-hmm. And it's basically about being listened to.
Yeah.
This was, I heard you, I saw what you did, and I'm giving it back to you as a present. It may be a present, which is a head in a box, but it's a present. And that's kind of, there's something really magic and caring about that.
I am really excited for that aspect of just like, this is very much an exercise in like hardcore listening to your players and giving them back what they want. And I am really excited for that. And I love that the first session of Rituals is so well explained and written that it's such a great on-ramp for me as a game master, for anyone as a game master. And then in the book, between like sessions 2 and 3, there's great resources that you guys provide of the kind of preparation you should do and like how you should prepare for the next sessions. And then my favorite part of it is at the end where it just says, but don't overdo it. Just wherever you're at right now, just stop and that's fine.
It's like, chill. You're fine. You've got this.
Something, we all need to be told sometimes.
That first session was so designed as like, I mean, I used to be a video game journalist. So like the first session is very much, it's a training. It's the first hour it's the first couple of hours of a game. It's like, you go through, it teaches you about your characters, it teaches you about this stuff. Then you go into die, you have an initial encounter against some monsters. And you won't lose that fight, but it's a chance that everyone experiment their toy, they pick up the stuff. They all have a cool character moment. You know what I mean? All the really, as in, here's a basic way. You're going to learn all the mechanics in an easy way. And then you'll end the session before we have to worry about anything too much. And in fact, there's still enough personalization in that first session. And everyone gets their cool magic girl moment of transformation and stuff. There's enough there that makes it feel like it. And even like later on, especially in other ways of playing die, different ways of doing it. But rituals is really basic in that kind of, if GM knows what happens next, tell them. If not, ask what's outside. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
We go east. Do I know what's east? If yes, tell them. If no, so what's east of the town in your teenage fantasy world? It holds together, I swear.
I'm very excited to play it.
Me too. I'm looking forward to it, hearing it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. The last thing I want to talk about before we get out of here is specifically, and we've kind of been touching on it, here and there throughout this interview, but what advice do you guys have for game masters who are running this game for the first time, and also for players who are playing this game for the first time? Like, I think we definitely talk a lot about how game masters can improve, but also players coming in the right mindset and with the right attitude is a huge help to the game as a whole. Is there any specific advice you give to first-time players or game masters of this game?
Kieron has much more advice than I do. He's run it a lot more than I have. But one thing I would say is Die is a game about your obsessions, about your character's obsessions. And so if your obsession is the film Hellraiser 2, and then all of the things are like all of the monsters are from Hellraiser 2, then it's really important that you as a person, not as a persona or a character or a made-up person, you, the actual person sitting around the table, knows what Hellraiser 2 is. You have to pick obsessions, which at least one, preferably two people at the table, know what they are. Otherwise, it's not going to quite ring true. Also, you just get to dump all of your things. So if my die world would have Warhammer in it, there would be some sort of 40k element. There would be some sort of grim, dark bureaucracy in it. Mm-hmm. And I can lead into that, and I can take the piss out of it, and I can play with it. But I wouldn't be able to do Wheel of Time. I wouldn't really have the first clue about how to do that. So I think that's my advice, is know what you're talking about.
And it's almost the fan service aspect of Die. It's like, yeah, just do it. I mean, one of the biggest yelps I ever had from running a game of Die was when I dropped David Bowie backstage at the Reading Festival. Like, and the players almost died. And it's like, David Bowie isn't really here, guys. I'm just pretending to be David Bowie.
I'm just saying he's here.
But that was because they were four music obsessed friends. You know what I mean? Like, this is in some level, like, don't be afraid of doing stuff you care about. And don't go too far away from home. Do stuff you're really interested in playing with. And the second is, like, this is especially people who've never played games before. It's like, go for it. Like, don't hold back on the questions. Like, be big, make big, bold choices. It's like, I actually did in my latest newsletter, I did some kind of my 5 basic rules for players in any game. And like one of them, it is less of the general rules, but it's specifically saying I love it or I hate it is a better choice than anything middling in almost any story game.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you feel like your parents? I love them or I hate them. It's much better than they're all right. You don't guess. And that, like, you're not trying to make balance. You're trying to make balanced people. You're trying to make people who are going to go into a fantasy world and really get themselves through an emotional grinder. So like, be open. The other one I'll give, really like listen to your friends. Like GMS to listen to. It's really good for all players anyway. Like, you're in this together, but really excited about people's choices. I hate this guy, and this is my brother. Or I love him. Like, why does his girlfriend treat him so badly? Or like any of those things. That really, like, you're in it together. Because I always talk about this in RPGs generally. RPGs are like forming a band. Like, and you're getting together, you're working out the rhythm that you're going to be playing together. What we're going to do together? Are we going to be a punk rock band or are we going to be salsa? And that's fine. There's no wrong choices. That's what you make in the room together. And that kind of commitment to like doing it, I think Die really rewards that.
Yeah, I know one of the things I always try to tell my players, especially when they've never played before, is don't try to break the world, but don't worry about breaking the world. You're not going to, as long as you don't actively try to like really destroy this. But coming in a very collaborative headspace and really listening is what I'm excited about this game. I think it's, really sets the players and the game master up for success in that way that I really love. And I think it's just going to be so fucking fun. I've been really geeking out about this game for a while. Just reread the comics, just reread the game, sent it off to all my players. I keep getting emails from them being like, oh, I can't wait to try. I want to try this. I want to try this.
Question, Brian.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do you mind if I ask you something?
Yeah.
Is there any area you're worried about running? Like that's like flipping around. I might be able to give you specific advice if you've got any concerns.
You're doing my job for me.
I'm extra journalist. I can't help it.
Honestly, anytime I run a new game, I'm always worried about like the first couple of minutes. Like if that, like the first moment where you get past the intro and then the game has to start. And I think for this game, I'm less worried about it because I think you've done a great job of setting up that first session. It's it's a little bit on rails in a way that like the start of a video game is, like you said before. I think my biggest worry is, and I think maybe it's because the comic book is so, the world is so, vast and exciting. My biggest worry is being able to weave enough of the players' backstories and wants and needs into the world itself to make it this exciting, expansive world. That's my biggest worry is like the big picture thing, to make this as enjoyable and immersive and personalized to each of the players' experience as possible.
I think the fact you're worrying about that means you'll be fine. It's like, because it's like, it is just kind of, actually, it's listening and like, okay, how can I, it's almost like if I ever get a trope, how can I make this trope less, because you have that checklist, which one of these things is most appropriate? So I think you'll be fine. So one of the things I occasionally worry about, like, I think it is stressed, but like, don't be afraid that, like, the first minute when the game starts, so they're sitting in die and they're there with the dice and they haven't picked it up yet. You can let that breathe. That's normally, as a GM, I sit back and let the players have that first response to die. Like, did the players think they're in a fantasy world? Did the players think they're tripping? Did the player grab a dice? Did the player do anything but grab a dice? And there's no wrong choices there. That's really when players start to really play. And, let that moment breathe and then the fallen come in when it gets boring. Because, that's the kind of like, that's the going to a fantasy world is the magic of die, making that moment as real as possible. All the rituals do that to some degree, but also letting people have a chance to just really live that. Like, what the hell is this? Where's all the color gone? Why is the person with chainsaws for eyes coming at me? That's where that first session sings, I think.
I can't always tell when a session or when a campaign is going well by the amount of time I can like sit back and my players are just running the games themselves. And once you get to that point where all of a sudden you sit back as a GM and realize you haven't talked for 5 minutes and your players are all building the world and exploring together, that's when I know it's successful. And getting to that point, like, as quickly and efficiently, not to make this, too mechanical, but to get there as quickly and as easily as possible is what I'm always trying to do. And anytime you have a new game, there's so many extra little tidbits. What are the mechanics? What can this person do? What can't this person do? Getting to that point is what I'm worried about, but also very excited to do. Because I think this game has a lot of great stuff that players can play with that I'm excited for them to, start tinkering with and playing with.
Excellent.
Plus, you've got you're all streamers, aren't you? Like you're all like you play online.
Everyone's pretty much performers.
It's a very performy game. It streams good.
Yeah.
You're all right. There's a lot to lean into.
No, I think it's going to be great.
I'm looking forward to it. Listening, it should be good.
Great. Any last minute things you guys want to say or add before I kind of start the outros?
The important thing to do when all the players sit down before the game starts is to establish dominance. So you want to eat as many dice as you can in front of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
I find it's very important. Make sure all the players buy it directly from RRD.
Yes,
it's available for pre-order. They should buy them for themselves, for their friends, for their family, for their
Special
enemies.
Edition.
Yeah.
Preferably with a backup copy in case you spill onto the first
obviously,
copy.
You need doubles.
Yeah, obviously. It's clear.
Yeah. Plus, if you really want to impress the players by eating dice, get official die-branded dice from our pre-order store and eat those. They're ergonomically designed to go down real smooth with minimal lubrication.
Yeah.
And then whenever you're just like kind of fiddling around the table, why fiddle with a regular coin when you can have a die-branded fair gold coin?
Don't eat those. Those ones are poisonous. But aside from that, you're fine. You can lick them. You can lick the coins. That's fine.
That's all I want to do with the coin anyway. Just lick it, put on a
Chew
battery.
the corner off your GM screen.
Thank you so much, everybody. That is it for this episode of My First Dungeon, Die. And if you head over to your podcast player right now, you will find episode 0 of our actual play campaign featuring some amazing players I cannot wait for you to meet. Before we get out of here, Kieron, do you want to tell everyone where they can find you online and what other projects you may want people to know about?
I'm Kieron Gillen. I'm Kieron Gillen almost everywhere. I probably won't be on Twitter properly by the time this goes out, but hopefully we'll see if I actually do that or not. But Kieron Gillen everywhere. I've got a newsletter on Button Down where I send it every week or so, and that's basically where I download everything. Work-wise, I'm only writing one book for Marvel at the moment, which is the Immortal X-Men, where the X-Men are immortal until they die randomly. And I'm working on other comics. I'll tell you another time. Seriously,
Okay.
there's so much stuff going on with the X-Men you would not believe. And I'm working on other projects which are not announced, and I'll be like writing bits and pieces. Like basically, I'm just writing Immortal X-Men and nothing else announced at the moment. I'm trying to work out what else to write for Die. Oh, one last Die tip: if you're mailing your players, don't make the subject line just Die. Because it scares people. They see it arrive in the inbox, and you make it regarding the game of Die we will play, or something like that. Because it can really you can make people worried.
Yeah, I almost made that mistake the first cast email. I was like, Die, the RPG.
If people want to find me, I am GS Howitt or G Showit with 2 T's at the end, pretty much everywhere. Like Kieran, I am also increasingly agnostic about Twitter, but it is the place I have the most sway, so I keep posting there. In terms of things I'm working on our upcoming game, we're hopefully going to get into playtest before Christmas, is called Hollows. And Hollows is a game about you play 1860s monster hunters kicking in the back door of someone else's personal depression and brutally murdering their demons.
I'm so looking forward to this.
It's like Bloodborne crossed with Silent Hill. I think it's probably the best way I can do that. If you're interested, search Hollow's playtest, because I'm not very good at linking things. But you can find it. You can ask me. We'll sort it out.
Luckily, I am very good at linking things. You can find links to everything that everybody said down in the description. If you'd like to buy your own copy of Die, you can find it in the link in the description, or go to rowanrookanddeckard.com to buy it, or check out your friendly local gaming store. And if you like this show and want to support it, the very best way you can do that is going to your podcast player right now, clicking follow, and leaving us a review. It really does help more people find the show, and it just makes us feel real warm and good inside. You can find My First Dungeon online at My First Dungeon on Twitter. And as always, remember, if you're having fun, you're already doing it right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Hey all, it's Brian. Real quick before you go, if you like this show and you want to support more great seasons, you should head on over to patreon.com/myfirstdungeonpod and jump into the Dice Pool. That's the name of our one and only Patreon tier that's just $5, where you'll get additional actual plays and extended talkbacks each and every month. We'll see you there. Splash.
You like us. You really like us. At least, I assume that you do, as you've listened to every minute of this episode. And yet you haven't already left us a 5-star review? Ugh. Well, what are you waiting for? Get over to Spotify or Apple Podcasts and leave that review now. It's always wonderful to hear words from our adoring fans. Getting more ratings helps people find the show and love it as well. And we love to hear your nice words. So head over to Spotify and Apple Podcasts and leave us that 5-star review. Ta-ta!